marketing channel in South Africa. And let's start off with actually telling you a bit about who I am, where I fit in. My name is Anne. I head up a company and a consultancy called Nfluential, and we're the first consultancy in South Africa that actually specializes in doing influencer marketing strategies for brands and not just doing influencer campaigns. So let's start at the basics. What is an influencer? I think the simple answer is it's absolutely anyone who has influence over someone else's opinion or decisions, especially when it comes to purchasing decisions. And as we say, Nano Influences is very big these days, and that is everyone and anyone who's out there. I always say it's my mom, it's my dad, it's my uncle, it's my brother, whoever I can go to for advice, and I listen to what they tell me. Like if I want to hear things about gardening, I speak to my mom. I'll go to the nurseries she recommends. When I want to buy a new phone, I speak to some journalists I know that's in the tech space, and that's how we influence each other, and everyone does that. But I think it's really important to note that influencers have always existed. Before social media, before the internet, people who influence on a daily basis, we just didn't have a name for that. So before social media, before internet, we had influencers that was mostly celebrities and then our close friends and families. And I just quickly put together a couple of slides of people who kind of changed pop culture in the world and who kind of influenced the world as we know it today. Queen was huge for music scene. Obviously, the beard William Shakespeare was great when it came to actually plays and literature. Tupac, I mean, same with music, but also with literature and changing the way people see life. And for me, who was a bit older, the Wakefield twins was a big influence in book reading when I was a child. Same with Martin Luther King Jr., Maya Angelou, good old Rian Kreyvagen, who never ever ages, which is amazing. But also William Smith, who influenced us all when it came to maths and science when we were children. And that had a big impact on a lot of people's lives. So when we look at that, that was before the internet. Then in 2004, Facebook was born. And I think looking back, none of us really realized how Facebook would change the way how people connect with each other around the world, and even as brands, how advertising would change down the line. Today, it's still the biggest platform in the world, as well as in South Africa when it comes to social media and penetration. And it's more about people putting out really personal things on their personal pages and connecting really authentically with like pictures of your kids and your family and what you do in your daily life. And it's still that today. In 2006, Twitter came about, and it was and it still is the complete opposite of Facebook, where it's more about meeting strangers with the same mindsets and kind of connecting on topics on that. In 2010, with the world becoming a little bit more visual, we saw the birth of Instagram, and that's also one of the biggest platforms we still have today. So these are still the three biggest social media platforms we have when we talk about influencer marketing in the world. But reality is that in 2019, there's literally a social media platform for every single kind of niche that brands want to reach and for people to connect with like-minded people on, which is great. And I think early on brands realized that there are lots of people on these platforms and they are already talking about topics that relates to their brand or their products, but also that people are speaking directly about their brands and their products to each other on these platforms. But unfortunately, brands would never be able to be part of that conversation, purely because people don't really trust brands. People trust people, and the moment a brand would kind of get into a conversation, people would shut down and kind of exit it. So wouldn't it be fantastic if you can get people who are already engaging in the conversation to kind of talk about your brand in that conversation? And that's really where the boom of influencer marketing came from. But when we look at the stats, it also supports this. Why is the industry becoming bigger than ever in the world and in South Africa today? So firstly, I think it's important to look at what our digital ad and traditional ad spend splits are. This is stats from the United States, but South Africa we see following quite on the same trends. And even in 2019, we can see that digital's ad spend kind of overtakes traditional ad spending, and by 2021, it far outweighs it. So from that, we can already see and deduce that people are spending a lot more time online than what they were before, spending time on print, digital, print and television. And supporting this with mobile internet access, PwC's entertainment and media outlook for 2018 to 2022 shows that mobile internet sector will continue to dominate in South Africa, and by 2022 it will account for over 90% of total internet access revenue. And from that, we basically said that most people in South Africa has got smartphones, if not more than one, and we spend a lot of time on it, not only to communicate with each other, but also to go online and actually spend data there. So that's exactly that. They expect that smartphones, tablets, and fixed broadband, so our Wi-Fi's, will drive this in South Africa with data consumption, with a over 31% year-on-year growth up until 2022 for this. And by that time, we're looking at 7.9 billion gigabytes spent on data online through our cell phones and tablets. So that's really important to know as a marketer, because we want to know where people are actually using their data. And when we look at that, the first one is video, and I think we can all attest that YouTube has a big impact on that, and other streaming services such as Netflix as well, which we can access on our phones, and then obviously with the likes of Instagram TV and Facebook Live and those kind of things. So there's a 35% year-on-year growth predicted for that, for 4,751 million gigabytes being spent on that by the year 2022. Browsing coming in second at 425 million gigabytes with a 21 year-on-year growth, and with social media at 178 million gigabytes with a 24% year-on-year growth. So that's fantastic, and it makes complete sense that video advertising is a big thing. And we also know that influence marketing drives a lot of this video advertising. I mean, if you look at the likes of gaming and streaming and just vlogging, that's literally for every niche on streaming available as well. And the forecast is that in South Africa, marketers will spend 467 million rand on video advertising in 2022, which is a massive jump from just a couple of years ago where it was only 77 million. So we look at this, we know that we spend a lot of time online, but in South Africa it's especially quite bad. We spend over 8 hours a day online. That's literally a second job if you look at it. If it's not your job to be online and you're still spending 8.5 hours a day, that's literally 16 hours a day that you're literally like focusing on a job basically. And that's also why advertising on the internet will grow to 9.4 billion rand in 2022. And advertising for the first time in 2022 will be higher than TV advertising in South Africa. So this is all good and well, and we take into consideration that people spend a lot of time on their phones to access various sites with browsing, social media, and streaming. And we know that people value peer-to-peer recommendation a lot more than when brands scream about their own brands. So it's obvious that it is important that influencers are being used by brands. But what does the stats say about this? So worldwide, 70% of people, consumers, look at social media before making big purchasing decisions, and 49% of all consumers rely on influencer recommendations, which just confirms that people don't really trust brands, but when they have an authentic recommendation by someone who's already used the product or service, they will take that to heart. 47% of people use ad blockers around the world. So chances are that if you are doing digital advertising, half of your target market isn't seeing your adverts. So influencers are also really good to get around that. And only 14% of people actually remember the last time they saw an advert and also what it promoted. And that's just the way through streaming. We're all watching on-demand TV these days, through Netflix and Showmax and Catch Up. And even with radio, people are veering more and more towards podcasts instead of actually listening to the radio. So then at Nfluential, we went out and we wanted to speak to consumers in South Africa and understand when they access social media, what platforms do they love spending their time on, and also kind of just asking them, when it comes to influencers and their content, how do they feel about it? We had just under 1,000 respondents to the digital survey we did, and it kind of mirrors what's going on in the world right now. 91% said that Facebook is still their primary kind of platform that they're on, and it makes sense that most brands are still on their advertising, even though the algorithm nails us every time. Secondly, we saw Instagram is obviously on the grow. In 2018, it had a huge growth in South Africa and it just keeps on growing. And then followed by Twitter, Pinterest, and Snapchat for the younger people. But then we also asked people, why do they follow influencers? Because we want to know as brands why and how we should use influencers when it comes to advertising to brands. And the top three just kind of resonated with us because that's kind of what we expected, and what we always tell our clients is always choose influencers that are authentic within your industry, because when they speak about true experiences, it is more believable, and people follow these influencers because they are credible and trusted by them. 57% of people said that because someone's an expert on a topic that they're interested in, which makes complete sense. People follow people that have similar interests to them, and they want to learn more on this topic. And then 52% they want relatable content, which is just human behavior. When we look at content, we want to be able to relate to it in some way. Then at the lower end, we saw that 27% of people say they follow them because they know them in real life. 25% said that aspire to be like this influencer that they're following. And then at the lowest, 8% say because they are celebrities. And that also just reiterated for us what we always say to clients is, don't look at big celebs and just want them for your campaigns because they've got huge millions or hundreds of thousands of followers. Yes, they are very popular, but people don't really see them as being that credible and influential. But they do have their space within the tiers of influencers. If you want mass awareness and top of mind, they are fantastic. Then we looked at why people get influenced, and we asked people, why do you get influenced by social media influencers? And 75% again said because people are an expert on a topic. So again, people follow people that they can learn from, something that's interesting to them. And then second and third was influencer who gets a lot of engagement and they have big social media followings. And that for us is just human behavior and psychology. When we see someone who has a lot of followers and get a lot of engagement, we automatically think this person must be very knowledgeable, and so we'll take their advice. And then again at the low end, 13% said because people are celebrities. So again, we see that celebrities aren't going to convert people into sales. And then most preferred content, again, relatable, and I think that's very human. We all want to relate to content we see. We want to have that instant connection with people we follow. Authenticity is obviously a big one. We want people to be authentic and speak from personal experience and not be fake online. And then we see that people also like a bit of creative content that they won't necessarily be able to do themselves. And again, coming in with not heavily branded content, people want to see very subtly branded content because, again, people don't really want brands to influence their decisions, but rather people. And then lastly, we asked them, what are their biggest concerns regarding influencers? And I think I always wondered about this because being in the industry, and I'm sure all of you, we know that there's concerns, but do the normal consumer out on the street actually have concerns when it comes to influencers? And it turns out they do. 50% were worried that influencers aren't being authentic online, so are they lying to us? 48% asked, like, are they being transparent? They're worried about that if there is sponsored deals going on, are they upfront about it? Do they tell their followers about that? And then 40% is worried that people have fake followers, and 24% said that they are worried about all three. And later on, we'll talk about how regulation has now stepped in South Africa to actually regulate the influencer space so that consumers are protected against these worries. But now we know that influencers are also important to brands because people spend a lot of time online and people don't really trust brands. So finally, influencer marketing is a legitimate marketing channel. For the last couple of years, it's just absolutely exploded, and more brands are using influencers to speak directly to their target markets. And there's a reason for that, because people trust them, they're authentic, and also there's a lot less wastage when you speak directly to target markets. But because it's a direct or a legitimate marketing channel now, brands need to become a bit more serious about influencer marketing and look at strategy behind it as seriously as with your PR strategies, your TV, your digital strategies. It's just as important to have a strategy in place for influencer marketing and not just using it as a tactic, as we've seen it being used a lot of the time. So Sun Tzu in The Art of War summed it up really well. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So you can have a lot of tactics that kind of plug and play with the rest of your strategies or the rest of your plans, but if it doesn't flow and there's no kind of goal at the end of it, then you don't know what success looks like, and how can you measure it, and how do you know it worked. So we see a lot of the times when we speak to brands and they are a bit disheartened about influence marketing and telling us they don't really think it works, and we ask them about their previous campaigns and what happened and who did they use and how did they go about it, if there was a strategy, and most importantly we ask them what was your objectives of the campaign, what was your goal at the end of it, and a lot of them won't be able to tell you. They kind of see success as like 1 million likes, and you're like, well, if you wanted awareness, that's great, but if you wanted to sell product, or you wanted people to actually talk about or engagement, then you did the wrong strategy. And I think just as influencer strategy isn't taken as seriously as other strategies or other marketing channels, a lot of marketers also think that an influencer is an influencer is an influencer. And they kind of do get caught up in amount of followers or number of followers, where in fact it's quite complex and there's very different tiers in the space. And also we, in South Africa, because it's still in infantile stages here, we can't kind of look at the definitions in America or in Europe, because they are far more advanced than we are. So in South African content, I'm going to very quickly just kind of go over what the different types are. So nano influencers are your everyday people. Every single person is a nano influencer. We all have influence over either our friends or our family when it comes to purchasing decisions or their opinions. And they are the most influential because they are the most authentic. They don't have mass followings, but they're very much trusted in their circles. And you would go to your friends, your family for specific things, and you would kind of take their advice for that. And then we look at our micro influencers. In South Africa, we look at them up to about 10,000 followers across the board. And they are experts in certain topics or niches. And people follow them for that, because they are those experts. They have very engaged audiences, they are very personable, people really see them as credible and authentic, and they're very highly influential. Our mid-tier guys are still experts in their niches, but they have up to about 50,000 followers across the board, and they include your up-and-coming celebrities in South Africa. So they give you that mass reach already, they're a bit less engagement, but they're still influential. Then our macro guys is the most common influencers, those are our celebrities. In South Africa, we kind of look at them to about 300,000 followers across the board, and those generally give you mass reach and awareness, but when it comes to engagement, not so much. And then our mega guys are like very rare in South Africa with over 300,000 followers, and we think of your Bonaims, think of your Black Coffees, who don't only have just South African appeal, but they also have international appeal generally. And so sometimes when you do a strategy, you kind of take all the objectives into account, who's your target market, what you want to achieve, and you look at which type of influencers would be best to actually achieve those. And sometimes it's not just one type of influencer, and we use them together, we mix it up a bit, and we add those layers to the campaign to get mass reach, for instance, to get more authentic content out there on a mass basis. So I'm going to show you two examples that had of campaigns that had really good strategy behind it, but also kind of mixed up tiers of influencers. The first one was done by The Salt. They're a nano influencer company in South Africa, and they had a banking client who has really good banking fees, and on a monthly, at the end of the month, they send their customers a text to show them how low their fees were, and they wanted to make awareness of that. That was their only objective. They wanted to make awareness on Twitter predominantly, and they wanted to do it in an authentic way. So the strategy behind it was, well, let's find nano influencers, everyday people who are already those banks' clients, so it's very authentic. But instead of boosting it with paid media behind it and get that sponsored tag, which makes it a little bit less authentic, we decided to use macro influencers to actually retweet or retweet with a comment, and then kind of you get that reach in a much more authentic way. So they used 70 nano influencers who were already brand fans or already part of the bank, And they asked them simply, take a screenshot of those fees that you get every month, share that on Twitter, add a comment, and that's it. It was a 2-day campaign, 160 posts went out, and because of the macro influencers giving them that authentic reach, they had over 13 million reach or opportunity and almost 4% engagement rate because people were very intrigued about this bank. The second one is a quick video I'm going to show you, but for context, it was for MTN last year. I don't know if everyone remember the drama of them taking away free Twitter. It ran for 4 years. It started out as a promotion for 90 days back in the day, but it did so well that they kept on extending the promotion, but after 4 years they decided that they're going to cut it. In past, when they would take away services, they realized that they send out a press release, the press would pick it up, their competitors would take it to social media, and so would their clients, and it would generally be very negative and reputational damage. Hashtags like MTN is trash would trend. So our aim was to put it out on Twitter was the strategy, because that's the platform where it would be affected by MTN, so they start owning the conversation, which was one of their objectives. Put out a reasonable hashtag and hoping that clients would actually latch onto that. And their second objective was to have a neutral sentiment at the end of it. They weren't hoping for positive. I think we all knew that was absolutely impossible. But neutral was in reach. It was a 48-hour campaign on Twitter. And what they did was they got 36 influencers between micro and macro, and they were briefed to simply engage in the conversation. They were told to not defend MTN in any way, but just to join in on the conversation and the fun that was being had, and steer the conversation into a more neutral sentiment. And this is what happened.
Thanks. So after the yellow SIM card, just watch.
Driver na band to keep a matches. We are last down, but singing for fire. Singing for fire. Singing for fire. Cut it for fire. Over singing for fire. I was some yes, I'm not like Billy Dick. Uma warman, I Billy Yelly, 19 Elise, and Jive again. Oh, somebody of Mum Tigilish. I was I can't believe it. We are over me now, I'm killing it. Can't walk in my shoes, I'm Tigilish. I think I'm in a issue. But I think I'm in a hit. She's over my desk. Yes, you're feeling it. Pushing is down. Awagumnandi kopoge dance kante ngoba nongathubisa ngihamba nezami or I choose myself kade for fine insimbi na yasho busy ngeke.
Yeah, it worked incredibly well, and the likes of Casper Nyovest, Bonang, they all joined in, and they weren't on the campaign. They just kind of saw the trending hashtag and kind of got involved. So those are two really good examples that if you have good strategy in place and you use different tiers of influencers, how it could work out really, really well. But then having a good strategy is all good and well, but if you don't have the tools to implement it correctly, it can still fall flat, unfortunately. And I always recommend that my clients use credible influence agencies in South Africa that not only has listening tools, but have audience analytic tools. So listening tools basically scrape data from social media, and they do exactly that. They listen. They can tell you what people are talking about, what they're saying about your brand, what the sentiment is, and all that kind of things. And when finding influencers, that's very important to know what conversations they do engage with. But even more important is to have that back-end access that audience analytics tools gives you, so that you can actually analyze someone's audience. Because ultimately, you're using that influencer to speak directly to your target market, and you need to know if that person has the right target market, if that mirror what yours is. So back-end access is very important. It identifies more than vanity metrics like influencer followers and engagement, and they always generally provide account managers or collaborators to actually see the entire process through from start to finish. So with any industry, it can't all be rainbows and sunshine. There's always something bad. And in the influencer industry, there's a huge problem with influencer fraud at the moment, especially on Instagram. And I'm sure most of you have seen over the last couple of months people talking about this. So basically, it's mostly on Instagram because that's where a lot of money are spending cash on influencers at the moment. And I'm just going to take you through two types of fraud and how to spot it and how to avoid it. I think the most common is buying followers, and it's very easy. For like $900 I can get 10,000 followers in my account right now. And back in the day, when people bought followers, it was generally bots, and Instagram would do a cull every now and then. You'd see people's following drop tremendously, and it would be very embarrassing. People would be called out on social media. And also now there's auditing tools that you can check people's handles, and you can see bot versus real followers. But with that, the scamsters and the fraudsters got quite smart, and now you can buy real followers. So they're active members on Instagram, so when the call comes, they're not going to be affected. Your auditing tools won't pick them up because they are real. So there's a couple of things you can do to spot them. Again, if you have access to audience analytics tools, it will show you audience growth. And generally on Instagram, if there's a big spike in followers, unless that person's gone viral, it's generally bought followers. Secondly, if in your gut you feel like this person is getting a lot of engagement on just kind of random content, and it kind of looks inflated, they're following, just do a bit more digging. It's very easy to just tap on who's liked piece of content. And in South Africa, we find that if people are buying those followers and those likes, it's a lot of people sitting in Russia or China that's liking this content, and unless it's like travel bloggers, so it makes complete sense that they're speaking about something that's relevant and relatable to those cultures, it's bought followers and bought engagement. And it's the same with the followings. If you just go on people's followers, you can easily spot if it's very foreign people following them. With buying engagement and comments, it's very easy to spot. It's generally very repetitive. Like here's an example: loving winter, loving winter, loving winter, loving about 1 million times. And also usually a lot of emojis that won't make sense to the content. Then you kind of big red flags. Secondly, we have our engagement pods. This has also been quite a hot topic. A lot of people think it's harmless, but unfortunately it's not. Engagement pods is basically a group of people who agree between each other to, once you've posted something online, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, doesn't matter where it is, that you will go and like and engage with that content and then kind of inflate your engagement rates. And why it is a problem is because if influencers are using this inflated engagement rates to actually sell it into clients to get work for return for cash or for trade exchanges, that is literally fraud because you're lying to get cash, right? And in the UK, they are actually looking at passing a bill to actually view this as fraud, so that influencers who do that can see legal action from it because of it. So on Facebook, there's a lot of groups that you can join if you want to be part of the pod. The biggest one has got 25,000 followers. So you can imagine if only a fraction of those people go and engage with your content, how it would kind of boost your stats. WhatsApp groups are quite common with smaller pods, people going in, just posting, like I've posted, please go like, go engage. And then obviously group of friends, and that's much easier to spot because you'll see it's the same 10 people or 20 people that's tagged in a piece of content every time, and the same people will be kind of incestuously engage with each other content. So please just keep an eye out for that. But again, to avoid it, use a reputable agency again with the analytics tools, because they can spot, they're at the back end, they can see all of this going on, and they are there to vet influencers so that you don't work with fraudulent influencers. It's bad for your reputation, and it's also bad for the influencer's reputation down the line. So because of fraud and because of those concerns I showed earlier that consumers have, the Advertising Regulatory Board has got a social media code that's now being enforced. It's been out for about 2 months now, and basically it all boils down to protecting the consumer. It's very stringent on consumers can't be misled with content. So in summary, look, you can go Google it and go through it in depth, but very briefly, it boils down to influencers must mark sponsored content with ads, sponsored or gift, so that consumers, when they view the content, know that you're either being paid or being given something to post that, and that goes for trade exchanges and paid for content. And contracts must be in place with your influencers. So before any work commences, there must be a contract in place between the brand and the influencer that kind of outlines what the campaign is about, what the remuneration would be, whether it be cash, whether it be trade exchange, and also obviously what the expectations of the influencer is. And then they also added a clause that said that brands must be satisfied that influencers understand the information they're given on a campaign. So when down the line they get a slap on the wrist, they can't go and say, we didn't know. That's just not going to fly with them anymore. So I showed you 2 really good examples of good marketing, influence marketing campaigns. I just want to show you quickly 2 ones that's really bad, and the fails has 2 things in common. Basically, they didn't have the right influencers aligned with the campaign. I think we all know Scott Disick from Keeping Up with the Kardashians, quite a macro influencer in the States mainly, but also worldwide. An ambassador for Booty, some sort of shake that's apparently very good for you, but he obviously doesn't really care about the brand that much. So much so that he copied and pasted what the account manager kind of sent him. He didn't double check it before he uploaded it. And basically it said, here you go at 4 p.m, please write the below caption, keeping up with the summer workout routine with my morning routine, protein shake. So that's very careless of him. He did take it on, but not before hundreds of people called him out on it online. Over 4,000 people already liked it and took screen grabs of it. And that's a reputational damage on the brand as well. So again, just kind of please look at using influencers that's aligned with your brand and your values, and who's already an expert in your industry, so that they actually care about the product they're pushing out there. Secondly, Xbox One launched a new Star Wars game, and their strategy was basically to send the game to influencers that identified with a proposition of, we will pay you for a positive review on your social media channels. Benjamin Burnley is a frontman of a big rock band in the States. He's also quite vocal about loving playing video games, so they thought he would be a perfect person to send this to. And actually not. So I'm going to just bleep out the swear words, because he did post, but he was a negative influence on this. Said they wanted to pay me to post that I like this piece of beep game. They can shove it up there, beep, this game sucks and I'd rather watch beep awful prequels than play this piece of beep any more longer, because they've just ruined Star Wars for me. And this is so easily avoided. Literally, when you've chosen your influencers, just phone them and say, hey guys, this is what we want to do. We want to pay you something. Are you interested in doing this? Yes or no? And I bet you Benjamin Burnley would have said, no, it's not my cup of tea, and they could have avoided crisis management like this. No. And then I just want to leave you with the future of influence marketing, which is quite exciting. Virtual influencers. I don't know how many of you know that they're out there. They're starting to become quite big. They are CGI, so they're not real. They are created. They work with brands. This one, Little Michaela, is one of the biggest ones. She's got 1.6 million followers on Instagram. She's also a musician. She's got a YouTube channel if you want to check her out. These virtual influencers are very likable. Even though they're not real, they kind of do very human things and very relatable content. I took that screen grab when the Face app was very popular, and they kind of get in on all these really cool trends. And go check her out. She's done some work with Samsung recently, which was really, really cool. But the biggest advantage for brands working with virtual influencers, and you're going to see them come up more and more, is the fact that they're not human, which means they can't get embroiled in scandals like your Logan Pauls and your PewDiePies. Because the biggest nightmare for a brand is to get involved and sign up an influencer, and then a month later they do something horrendous, and now your name is attached to it, and you have to kind of do crisis management. So that will save brands a lot in those departments. And then Renault's already used a virtual influencer in one of their latest ads, and I just want to play it to you. It's actually very tongue-in-cheek and it's very cute.
My name is Liv. I'm a virtual ambassador for Renault Kadjar, created to experience real emotions for the first time, to discover, to explore, to feel. Strong, powerful. It's funny. While everyone is trying to live in the virtual world, I'm making it in the real one. You should try it. Renault Kadjar, escape to real.
So very tongue-in-cheek when she says, I'm trying to make it in, you're trying to make it in a virtual world, I'm making it in the real world. And that is basically, me. I hope that I left you with something to think about. For me, the key takeout should be just please start changing the way you think about influencers. Move away from thinking about only follow account, but look at real engagements and people who are authentic for your brand, no matter how big or small they are. Have an influencer campaign strategy in place, because ultimately that can lead to success or failure. Use credible influencer marketing agencies that has audience analytic tools that could really save you a lot of hassle. And remember that there are social media code, and please abide by it. And just keep an eye on virtual influencers. I think it's just going to become more and more interesting. That's it. Thank you.